Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 24 of Dungeon Meshi. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. Alright, so here we have it, the final episode of Dungeon Meshi, and I'm very pleased to say that with the benefit of watching this episode a couple days after it's come out, Season 2 has been confirmed, so, we don't have to worry about this being a full adaptation. And, that's always one of the things I worry about, for the longest time watching this, it hadn't been, clear to me whether or not this was a full adaptation, and I guess, with the understanding that we will be getting more, this isn't something to necessarily worry about how this will end, assuming, of course, they pick, a good place to end. I mean, I feel like at this point things are going to be rather low-key, seeing as how everybody has sort of gotten themselves race-swapped, and now they have to grapple with the, either the implications of being stuck as they are, or trying to find some way to transform back. I mean, they're really getting into it now. There's all sorts of issues with how, their respective races age. And I feel like Chilchek, he's really reveling in how Marcel's gonna have to deal with a shorter lifespan. And I'm wondering if this is a bit of a rude awakening for Marcel, too, in that, I guess that does bring up that whole aspect about her nightmare, and how aging is something she's afraid of, but I was wondering if this might be a realization for her that she's going to outlive all of her friends here if they were to transform back. Ooh. So, Lias has an idea here, but, okay, he was just thinking about Fallen. I was wondering if he had, a weird crackpot idea. Yeah, I guess this would be an issue, Suppose you do defeat the mage and all that, that doesn't necessarily mean Fallen will transform back, right? I mean, yeah, there's a lot of issues with that, I would imagine. Maybe that's a novel idea, sort of having Fallen stand in a hole at all times, but at the same time, that's more of a temporary or a cosmetic solution. Okay. So it's interesting that this is Lias' idea to sort of transform the lower half of her body into something more palatable, for want of a better term. Yeah. Wow, that is interesting that Laius of everyone is seemingly adapting the best because, he's kind of curious naturally. Like, it's not that everyone else is disgusted to have swapped races or anything, but, like, that's certainly got to be a weird, bizarre thing. Bizarre in a way that I guess, like, we humans have no real analog for. Like, I guess, like, the closest thing would be, like, transforming into a chimpanzee or something like that, but even then, like, that kind of overstates the whole business. Now, more importantly, they still have to fight off these gargoyles, presumably, and, they're not really equipped for it just because they don't know how to handle each other's bodies and all that. I mean, I do believe pretty early on, Marcel tried to cast a spell and quickly succumbed to mana sickness. So, things in that regard aren't boding well. Yeah, now I get why Chilchuck is sort of ragging on her, but at the same time, like, man, if you're not used to being small and easily trampled upon, like, man, it's gonna be a surprise when it happens. Oh. Oh dear indeed, that's not Kensuke anymore. So I guess the question is, did the gargoyle transform the sword, or did it, like, swap swords or something? Because I guess part of the idea here was that Kensuke was important, at least in regards to the prophecies, so... Although it seems like they've sort of figured it out here, the idea that they formed a circle and had mushroom spores was, I guess, the catalyst for the change, but, like, what's the guarantee that things will happen again if they form a circle? Or rather, if things do happen again, what's the guarantee that they'll change back to the way they were? I mean, I guess right now their main goal is to transform the gargoyle into something less dangerous, but I mean, there's no guarantee that would happen either, necessarily. I mean, what would happen if, say, like, Marcel turned into a gargoyle and the gargoyle turned into a halfling? I guess that would be beneficial in a sense, but I feel like being an animated stone statue is kind of not good either. Alright, so it worked, I guess. Huh. That's very interesting. But, yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense it would change into something else made of stone, but now that it's, like, totally inanimate, I guess that's probably the best outcome they could hope for. Although, unfortunately, it seems like the other one's sort of wise to their trick here. I guess the question remains, like, how are they gonna trick it? Like, I feel like they might have to get a little tricky with their geometry here. Oh, are they gonna, like, throw Marcel and form a loop around it? Oh dear. I think it is really fitting here that Marcel's the halfling for this to happen. Because I don't think Chilchuck would go along for it, and under normal circumstances, only he would be capable of maybe not surviving this, but being used as the integral piece. Ooh. Man, I was gonna say it probably doesn't bear thinking about what that liquid is, but hopefully that's just water. Yeah, I'm with Marcel on this. Like, this feels instinctively wrong. Oh. That's interesting. That changelings sort of reproduce by the death of the things that they change. I guess that kind of makes sense. You know, if the idea here is, you know, you can sort of change back by washing off the spores and all that. Yeah, you know, that is curious. It's not clear how, non-living things would be affected. And I guess more to the point, like, if you boil dumplings, would that effectively wash them too? Yeah, you know, there's a lot of questions here, not many answers, but I do support Senshi's idea of, frying the dumplings. That is, always good. Yeah, you know, if there's one thing about... Oh, God, the dumplings still have hairs on them. That is foul. But I do like Elf Senshi here. You know, there's something kind of silly about it. Oh. Okay, so I guess the mouth of that little statue acts as a ring and can change things. So, you know, that would be interesting, I suppose, if they were to haul that thing around. You know, they could change food one bite at a time. I mean, the question is, like, what sort of a dumpling do they transform it into? You know, it'd be funny if they could sort of, like, transform it into, like, pierogi or something. I mean, pierogies are basically dumplings, or like pierogi or a calzone. Yeah, that is interesting, because you do have to worry about, like, differences in fillings, too. Like, you know, like, what if it's stuff you don't like? That would be my concern. Alright, well, I guess, just like that, everyone's more or less back to normal. At least Chilchuck and Lias. You know, okay. I was gonna say it'd be funny if Marcel was still a halfling for a while. You know, just to prolong her suffering, I would enjoy that, but I guess it's not to be born. So I guess now that they have the time for it, they can really sort of investigate their surroundings, which I believe were, you know, like ancient dwarvish. So I guess there's this idea that the dwarves were at one point more advanced, judging by, like, the ductwork and the piping and all that, but I don't know. We haven't really delved into all that business in that great detail. Ooh. Oh, Lias. You know, he really is incorrigible to just sort of, like, not wash the sword and hope to preserve some of the changeling shrooms. Like, I mean, like, only bad things would happen as a result of bringing that around, you know? Man, an automatic trolley. I assume when they say something like that, they basically mean, like, an elevator, which, you know, there's a fair bit of engineering that goes into something like that. Oh no, it's more like a... well, a trolley, I guess. I mean, nevertheless, there is still a bunch of advanced engineering that goes into it, considering that... I mean, they appear to have, like, electric lights. Which... you know, I would feel like that's far beyond anything else we've seen here, technology-wise. Yeah, you know, looking at this thing, it seems surprisingly modern considering everything else we know about Dungeon Meshi and the world they inhabit. I'm wondering how much of this is directly from the manga itself here, because it seems a bit... maybe not odd, but kind of out of place that there would be this predecessor civilization that's sort of regressed. Like, that in and of itself isn't odd or unusual, but I guess it's kind of weird for it to crop up in a fantasy anime like this. So now we're learning a bit more about Elias and his background, you know, joining the army, joining a caravan, which, you know, could be indicative of desertion, which, you know, that's not good. You shouldn't do that, generally speaking, but I guess the idea here is that Elias doesn't really have, or at least didn't really have, like, this big sort of guiding motivation in his life. Which, you know, I guess that does make sense, like, even though he is an adventurer, he does seem kind of listless. Like, his goal wasn't to conquer the dungeon for its own sake. He's doing this all for his sister, essentially. So I guess maybe this sort of feeds into the prophecy and all that business. Like, he's not a person doing this for glory or personal gain. Therefore, he is the chosen person because he doesn't want to be, I guess. You know, it's like that saying, like, no one should be given power except the one person who doesn't want it, something like that. You know, I guess the idea is that if you want power or status or anything like that, you will be the sort of person who will be corrupted and abuse it, but if you don't want it, then, you know, at the very least, you can sort of be trusted to be responsible. Alright, so that's kind of an interesting admission. I guess the idea that the loneliness was what got to him, and that he doesn't really want Fallen to suffer the same fate. And in all fairness, she might not be necessarily, but the prospect that she is, you know, it probably weighs on everyone. And I guess of all the people it does weigh on, it would probably affect Marcel the most. I guess judging by how she's reacting. I mean, I guess we do know from the initial party that Marcel, like, aside from Laya, she was the most dead set on helping Fallen and doing all that. And poor Izutsumi getting stuck with comforting Marcel. I mean, you can just tell she'd rather be doing anything else, the poor cat. Okay. So it's interesting that, Senshi's elaborating on his food metaphor in regards to Fallen. The idea that you can separate bacon and eggs, but you can't really separate an omelet. You know, at least in regards to its constituent ingredients. So the idea is that maybe Fallen is salvageable. You know, she can be reverted easily enough to human. Or at least, you know, close enough. You know, it might be one of those instances where, like, some bits have to get cut off, but, it's better than being a monster, whereas, you know, Izutsumi, like, she's basically a lost cause at this point. Like, it used to being a cat, because that's, it's kind of your remit at this point. I guess that's another interesting thing, you know, the idea that, like, meat once consumed loses its identity, so if you eat all the dragon bits of Fallen, she will be human again. I mean, that's something. And, you know, coming from Senshi, like, that makes me question things a little bit. Especially seeing as how a recent episode was all about whether or not he was a cannibal. Not intentionally, of course, but regardless, let's just eat bits of Fallen. I can be trusted. I'm totally not a cannibal. And I guess tellingly, Lias's big problem is how many meals would we have to eat to do it? And it's presented as Lias being typically kind of bizarre, but he does raise a good point. If turning Fallen back requires eating all of the food, essentially, then how long will it take, Yeah, that is a problem. If you have to eat it, I guess the idea is you could get all involved, anybody they know, to partake in Dragon, but I feel if they were to tell their friends and associates what exactly is going on here, they might be a little bit reticent to partake. Just thinking about this, I guess if I were a hitherto uninvolved third party in this situation, I don't know if I would want to help them eat the dragon meat. That would, I think, smack a little too close to cannibalism for my comfort. I guess from Lias's perspective, and from the rest of the party too, they've already committed so many bad things at this point that you might as well just go through with it. If they've already used dark magic, you might as well commit, adjacent cannibalism, or whatever you would call such a thing. If nothing else, at least their goals are sort of set here. They need to awaken that lion, they need to fight the Mad Mage, and then they need to have a gigantic feast. And you know what? That sense of foreboding on the part of Shuro and the others, I don't blame them one bit. They don't know what's going to happen, but I get the feeling they're going to have to eat something that they might not like the look of. So interestingly, the Mad Mage is against Fallen eating a little walking mushroom, which, tellingly, that was one of the first things eaten. So if the Mad Mage considers it unworthy to be eaten, then, it's not really meaningful, really. But I suppose it highlights the dichotomy between Lias and company and the Mad Mage. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.